G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing Alec Balcombe from Drink Dodge. He's based here in Hobart, where I am in Australia. Thanks for your time today, Alec.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with how we know each other. So Mick Dennehy, who's a growth leader here at Grow a Small Business. You've known Mick for quite a few years.
I have known Mike for, ages. He's, family friend, and I've always known that he's been pretty handy with a business strategy and had obviously years of experience. And we did a little bit early on, but we haven't caught up in a professional sense for a little while, Mike. So it might be time.
Yeah. Tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
So Dodge, it's an all-natural, non-alcoholic hangover preventative. We developed it with Monash University over the past, 18 to 24 months. My business partner, Braden, background in exercise physiology and a pretty keen interest in sort of dietetics and what is known as biohacking, I guess. But he came to me and he said, I've got this idea, let's get it going. And so 18 months later, here we are. We've got cans in the market in 3 states, and it makes money by selling cans. Lots of them.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, no, it's good.
How did you start out?
Personally, I started out by, exploration. I graduated high school. I had a keen eye for woodworking and design and building things with my hands, and so I graduated. I was on the cusp of graduating high school, and I didn't really know what I was going to do with myself, to be honest. But my best mate Davo, who's probably a little bit more intellectually sound than me, suggested that we go up to Launceston and study this furniture design degree at the architecture and design school up there, part of UTAS. And so we did. We actually received some scholarships to go and attend that, and we did that for 3 years, and we had a good crack at it. We built some really beautiful things, and we sort of had a couple of shows, a couple of exhibitions, and we made a bit of noise around the school, in good ways and bad, I guess. We spent a lot of time partying, as you do at uni, and up in Lonnie, there's a lot of things. A lot of the roads lead to drinking booze. And so, we spent 3 years up there, and on graduating, we kind of wondered who wants to hire a furniture designer and for what purpose. And so we spun our tires for a little bit, then we decided to start our own business building and selling furniture and working in an industrial design space. And so we started Darb Studios in maybe 2011, 2012. And then over the next 12 months, we saw some pretty decent success. Nationally, we had some really good feedback initially about one of Davo's products, which was called the Eco Light, and it was during the sustainability movement. And we're still in it, obviously, but it was really the front of mind in the design scene. And so Davo designed these lights made out of cardboard, and they're all laser cut, and they're a beautiful object. And so we started pushing those nationally, and we got a really strong reception, and our PR sort of started to blow up, and we were in a lot of magazines, and we were getting invited to speak at events, and we're like 21-year-old kids, we didn't really know what we were talking about, but we're having a go.
Yeah,
I guess that's always been a part of my skill sets, having a go and sort of feeling it out as we move along. But
just on the furniture before we move on, do you know
Sure.
David Wise from Hydrowood?
I know Hydrowood. I know Andrew Morgan. I haven't seen him for a few years, but I know the stuff.
I had Dave on episode 22 a couple of years ago now, but his story sounds similar to you. Got to the end of uni. He's at the uni bar having a beer with his mates, literally just a week or a few days before they were graduating, and he and two of his mates having a beer, saying exactly that. We don't want to go and get a real fucking job. Let's start a business. So they started SFM Forestry Management. Yeah.
And to be honest, I don't know if anyone would have given me a real job. I flirted with every type of project there was, and I never really honed in on one skill set, and I still do that. But I guess, well, I mean, I'll explain how I get people to give me their money a bit later on, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, we did really well in the design sector, but and Dave and I have a really good sort of way of bouncing off each other and working in public spaces and working sort of events and stuff together. And so we built some good relationships and we leveraged those. And then I think it might have been maybe 2013, not so long into the business, we were approached by a couple of guys to basically jump on board a business that they were starting. They saw an opportunity and they were running after it. And I guess starting that Darb Studios and sort of making the most of what we had led us to a bit of a love for entrepreneurship and sort of hustle and grind and finding out how much we can make of an opportunity. And so we jumped onto this sort of software business, which was a CRM for brick and mortar shopping centers. And so the idea was that there was a really strong presence, or there was a strong sort of consensus that online shopping was going to be the death of brick and mortar retail, which obviously we know it's not. But at the time, people were a little bit spooked, especially in regional shopping centres. And so we worked with these two guys to develop a software package that was used in the shopping centre on a shopping kiosk. So we had a proprietary kiosk made in China and sent over, and then we basically filled it up with all of our tech and bolted them to the floor in shopping centres, and people could come in and scan their QR code and win points, and it gamified the whole shopping experience. And so I played with that for 3 years, I guess, and we had a bit of capital to play with around that one, and we made some good inroads. And then one of the major players, actually, we had a meeting with them. We had built this beautiful lookbook, and we took it up there and we pitched it to them, and then they built it in 6 months and pushed it out through all their shopping centres. And so we didn't have much of a choice but to pivot. And at that point, my brother passed away probably, I don't know, 3 months into that pivot. And we were going to sort of online, and instead of shopping centres, or to app-based, instead of shopping centres, we're going to use the whole community. But then, yeah, my brother passed away, and so I entered a completely different space, and I changed a lot over the next 18 months. And as a part of that, I guess as a part of coping with that big hit, personally, I decided to jump on a flight and fly up to Brisbane and to feel out some opportunities that I might be able to pursue for myself and by myself. I guess it was a little bit of a discovery process now that I think about it. But I flew up to Brizzy and a mentor of mine, or a mentor of ours, I should say, introduced me to a few people up there, and we started getting on the beers. And after a few too many, I managed to land a job running a couple of companies up there. Well, not running a couple of companies, but overseeing and being, I guess, the connection point between a few companies. And it was a really strong R&D. It was a really strong R&D sort of connection where we sort of tried to, I guess, each business did a little bit of research for each other. It was a complex sort of structure, but it was a very nice team mentality where everybody was working on everybody else's projects, and so I ended up working for I guess the parent company for 3 or 4 months before we decided that we're probably wasting a bit of resource, and so I ended up shutting one of those companies down, and then I started spending my time elsewhere. And so there were 2 companies that we left running and that continued to grow. One was called Yum, or This Is Yum, which is a chocolate company. And the whole idea of Yum is to sell chocolate to fund the creation of mental health resources that can then be made available to the public for free. And so I was using chocolate as a vehicle to deliver messages about how you can look after yourself mentally. And then the other one was Ordira, which is a headphone company. And this is where I guess I did some of my best work to date, pre-Dodge, of course. And Audira was a headphone company, and so they've got these magic headphones, and basically you do a hearing test through an app that's connected to the headphones, 32-point hearing test, or 16 or 8, depending on how in depth you want to be, and then the results of that hearing test are uploaded to your headphones, and it tailors the audio to your hearing profile. And so they're making some really strong developments into the health market, and I was able to have a pretty strong contribution to their success. And so I was there for 2 years, and over those 2 years, we could sort of I guess the C-suite at the time, which I would say I was a part of. We took the business from being in the consumer audio space, which was very competitive at the time. It was just after the Beats acquisition, and so everyone's thinking we can make bulk cash with headphones, which is very hard to do, I might add. And then we took it from consumer audio across into this med tech space, where the founder's a surgeon and a medical doctor, and so it all made sense. And then it's just jumped on the back of the NDIS, and it blew up. And then there's like a story where there's a young woman who was what's the technical term? I think mute. No, not mute. Non-verbal. There was a young woman who was non-verbal for 25 years or 30 years. And then she put on a pair of Audira headphones and did the hearing test. And then 2 weeks later, she was talking to her mum.
Wow, that's phenomenal.
Still makes me tingle.
And
so they're blowing up. They've just floated, and they've got. Obviously, there's. I'm not privy to the information that it used to be when they were a private company, but from how I understand it, I think they're about to do some really strong plays internationally and all that sort of stuff. And so that business taught. I worked with some really clever people, and I learnt a lot about what to do and what not to do. And I was part of the team making the mistakes, but also making the big moves towards success. So finished up with Audira in, I don't know, maybe 2018, 2019, something like this. Moved back to Tassie with my wife, and then we had a couple of kids and did the whole thing, got married. And then, Brado gave me a call. Must have been maybe summer 2021 or late 2020, and said, "Hey, mate, I'm keen to start getting back on the entrepreneurial into the entrepreneurial space, and I've got this idea. What do you reckon?" And we toyed with a couple of ideas before that, but he sent me this idea for a hangover preventative, and I said, "You're off your tits, mate. That's not going to work." Mm-hmm. And then he said, "Well, you're going to eat your hat, dingo. I'll send you down a couple of samples, and we'll see what you reckon." And so he did. He ordered some stuff from all over the world, brought them back, measured them out, put them into these little sort of capsules, which looked a little bit suspect in the mail, and then mailed them down. And me and my wife went out and had a bit of a crack. We tipped a few in, and then got home, had these pills, and woke up feeling pretty sprightly. And we thought, shit, this guy's probably onto something here. And so then, we decided to go pretty deep, pretty quick, and we got right into it. And we called the guys at Monash University, and we said, "Hey guys, look, we've got this idea. We want you guys to pressure test it for us, and make sure that we're not doing anything naughty." And it turns out we were doing a few naughty things, but we've since cleaned that up with their expertise. And 18 months later, we're in the can and in the market.
Wow, that is quite a journey.
It was a journey, and there's been obviously ups and downs and all sorts of things. But I've learned a lot about myself, that's for sure. I've learned about what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. And so the most important thing that I've, I guess, realised is that you can surround yourself with people who are good at the things you're not. And that's where Braden and I work really well. Braden's quite data-driven, and he doesn't get he's not reactive, whereas I'm quite a reactive, gut instinct kind of person. I'll go for it, and he'll say, "Hang on, dingo, slow down. What about this, and that?" And a lot of the time we end up sort of discussing it and getting a really strong resolution because of taking that time. So, yeah.
Great. So you were 21 when you started your first business. What year was that?
2000 probably 2012, I reckon.
Yeah. Right. Yep. Great. And you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of Drink Dodge?
Yeah. So Dodge is doing some pretty good numbers at the moment. I mean, We first produced 10,000 litres, which was 50,000 cans, which was basically our MOQ. And the intention of that was to really create a use case and to make sure that this product was going to fly and we're not sort of over investing up front, but also so we had some data to leverage into our next cap raise. And so we approached it in three stages, I guess. The first stage was that conversation I had with Braden and trying out the sort of the caps that he sent down and making sure from me and my commitment the product worked. And then the next one was the sort of the concept capital. And so we went to market and we raised, I think, we raised 400K to basically get brand, products and production, and then get it into the market to I guess as a case study. And so we isolated it in Tasmania. One of our investors that we brought in had access to 16 bottle shops, and so we already had, I guess, our platform to launch into to test different marketing strategies and all that sort of stuff. And so we quickly, I guess, leveraged that into conversations with other retailers. And so now we're in about 150 retail outlets across 3 states. And that's been in 3 months. And we're just about to launch into Endeavour Group next week across a couple of different venues to, again, pressure test it, check what sort of works and what doesn't with their sort of corporate culture and their store cultures. And then we'll go back and say, look, this is what success looks like. This is how we did, and we'll try and scale that. We've seen the back of probably 30,000 cans across promotion and sales.
That's in 3 months. That's great.
That's in 3 months.
Yeah.
And we're just about to go back and produce another run. And yeah, we'll start looking at some pretty decent. We've got some pretty ambitious goals for the next 5 years. And we're looking at not only national expansion and replicating the strategy that we developed here with that Tassie trial, but also international. So we've got our eyes on New Zealand, which is a pretty compatible market for this sort of thing. But then also UK, we're having conversations with some people about China, which is obviously the Wild West, but the conversation will entertain all the same. And then there's also Europe's got a huge market for this sort of thing, and so we're looking at our brand to make sure it's compatible and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
but yeah, we've seen some pretty strong growth. It's been 2 weeks, and we haven't. Oh, it's been probably a week and a half, and we haven't seen a new store, and so I start getting itchy, and then I'm thinking, what are we doing here, Brado? Brado's working on some big deals up there, though, so I'm hoping he'll pull me through.
And how many full-time equivalents did you start with 18 months ago, and how many are you at now?
We started with Brado and I doing the whole, the classic, like working at night and trying to find hours in the day whilst we had our day jobs, and we've got that whole story there tied up. But so we went full-time. One
full-time equivalent across the both of you started, yeah?
Yeah, I reckon probably one. And then Braden went full-time in June last year, I think, something like that. And then I came on full-time in November.
Yep.
And then that's when we started really honing in on the brand and the production and all that sort of stuff, and raising capital, which took a bit of time, because I think, as you probably agree, Troy, it's so important to have the right capital up front.
Yep.
And if we didn't have the investors that we've got, and if we hadn't taken the time to approach smart money, then we wouldn't be anywhere near where we are now. We wouldn't have as a successful sort of launch and trial. We wouldn't have had the retail network. We wouldn't have these relationships that we were leveraging across the board in distributorship, retail, design, printing. There's a lot of elements to this business, and so you need a lot of relationships. And we sort of started off the bat with these relationships. We now have Brado and I are full time, and then we have 1, 2, 3 people on a sweat deal. And so the way that we structure our sweat equity deals is basically, you give us this much time over this many years. However we use that quota is up to the relationship. And so I would say we have 4 full times with the intention of hiring another 3 over the next 3 months.
Wow, that's great. Fantastic.
Yeah, we're having a go.
And strategically, it sounds like you made the decision early on not to actually obviously do the manufacturing side of it. You contract that out
Yeah,
so you can focus on where the value is, which is the marketing and the brand.
that's right. I mean, we've always said from the start of the business that Dodge is a marketing company. If the product works, which it does, early on when we asked that question, if the product works, then really it's just about communicating the use case and the occasion to the consumer. And so Dodge is designed to be consumed as the last drink of the night. And so you get home and you have a can of Dodge, then you brush your teeth and go to bed. And so it's about creating that ritual as well. So every time you get home and you've had 2 to 20 beers, you won't say, "Oh, I've got my case of Dodge in the fridge, so I'm just going to go and drop one in."
Yep.
But yeah, it was yeah.
When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
Um, I have a very clear goal for this business, and over the next 5 years, I'd like to be doing some relatively large numbers, and that is the success for me. So I don't know. We haven't found the success that we want, but we are on our way. I guess it's how you break it down. So, I mean, at the moment, it's our goal is to get to an EBIT of 100 million over the next 5 years.
Did you say
And
EBIT? Did you say EBIT?
yeah, yeah,
$100 million.
yeah,
Geez, you have some audacious goals, Alec.
we're having a go. And so we're working with some pretty we're working with some pretty. Sorry, there's a guy outside the window. We're working with some pretty clever people to get there. And sorry, when I say I led you astray, there, we're looking to get a valuation of $100 million in 5 years at a 10 times
Yeah,
multiplier.
that sounds a bit better. Yeah,
yeah,
EBIT is
that'd
operating.
be cool. That $1 billion company in 5 years. How's it going? No, but we do have some pretty lofty goals. I mean, a $100 million vow in 5 years is still pretty lofty, especially for a brand new category. And so Dodge and the alcohol recovery category is still very, very new. And so there's a lot of work to be done in notifying the consumer that this sort of thing exists and it can work for you. And so, yep, they're lofty goals, but we've hit lofty goals before, and we're ahead of our targets at the moment. So
that's great. I'm definitely going to have you back on 2 years. That'll be halfway through your 5 year audacious.
yeah,
As
yeah,
Jim
that's
Collins
right.
said, big, hairy, audacious goal, you BHAG, jeebers.
Excuse me. Here we go. I reckon. Keep an eye on me.
Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast growing business?
Another thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast growing business? Advice, I guess. It depends who you are and it depends what your business is. But like, I mean, there's a strong player in the liquor category is influencer led marketing and brand ambassadors specifically. If you look at the things that the better beer guys have done with the Inspired Unemployed, that thing has blown the fuck up.
Huge, isn't it?
Ridiculous, ridiculous, and that's because those guys are so fucking good at what they do when they're developing the content. Like I just love it, and so that'd be a nice piece. That's not a cheap exercise. Whether you're using equity to fund, it's equity funded or whether it's cash funded, it's not a cheap exercise, and it's something that we're definitely looking at. We're in some conversations about it at the moment. But if you can bring in a brand ambassador for equity, then you've got that engagement, you've got that commitment to the project, and so they're building their own investment by pushing it out through their own socials and to their captive audience. And so I think that's probably the strongest play in terms of liquid. The other one would be surround yourself with smarter people in marketing.
Yeah, totally agree. Now, funding your business, you've mentioned you've got investors on board.
Yeah, so this is probably where I have the most joy in business. I love relationships, investment. I like selling, and I like honest relationships. And so when we first came to market, we brought Dodge out for concept capital, I think at a 2 mil vow. So we were raising 400 at a 20% stake. And we sort of started conversations with our insular network of people that we thought could contribute to the success of the business. We secured some capital pretty quickly, and we managed to raise a quarter of that within the first month, which was a nice little buffer. And I mean, the proof's in the pudding, right? We had these samples made at a flavour house in Melbourne, and we gave it to one of the investors, and they knocked it back and said, "Oh shit, you boys are on here. We just got to work out how we're going to communicate it. Here's $100,000. Let's go on. Let's have a go." And then so she's in the liquor industry, and she's quite well established, and so she was able then to introduce us to 2 or 3 other people who are in the liquor industry but have a completely different network. And so we ended up bringing in a couple more. We approached a guy called Peter Ball, who works with a company called Greater Outcomes, who's somebody, if you don't know, that you should. Bolly is, the most connected person I've ever met, but he's also a bit of a legend. He's looking after our investment raises, our capital raises, and he's very clued on, but he's also a very honest person. And that's, I can't stress how important that is for somebody in that position, because you're going to somebody and asking them for their money.
Yeah.
And they need to trust you. And so, our strategy was to raise 400K, however long that took, to prove our concept in the Tasmanian market. And so it took probably nearly 10 months. And we were running whilst we were raising. So it was a cash flow thing.
Yeah.
And the people that drop that capital in have access to all sorts of different skill sets that have contributed to the success of the business.
Yeah. And that $2 million valuation that you raised that 400 on, that's obviously pre-sales, pre-revenue.
Yeah. And so sometimes people would look at us a little bit funny.
Yeah.
But then and understandably so, but we backed it, and
they would be the accountants in the room. No, it's only
exactly
average of with a multiplier on EBITDA.
Yeah, well, that's right. And the thing is that it's an opportunity that you need to weigh up and see, do I want to be a part of this? And this ship's taking this rocket ship's taking off. And that's early stage business, right? That's the startup mentality, is that you're gonna have to pay the money if you want to play. And if you don't want to, that's fine, but this is what it costs. And we were pretty adamant about this is what it costs. Some people came back and said, no worries, that's all right. I'm happy to come on board, but will you give me a little bit extra if I do this? And we said, absolutely, we'll give you a little bit extra if you do that, because we're buying the access to maybe a retail network, or we're buying, and then we use that access and we go out there and we make the use case and we get the data, we make sure it's successful, and now we're leveraging that into our next cap raise, and that's working very, very well.
If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
If Dodge wasn't around, yeah, definitely. I think it's the thing is that the market's there, and the challenge is that it's a new category, and that's a lovely challenge to have, because you're going into a whole capturable market.
Yeah.
Therefore, it can be big.
Now, you've had a few businesses, so this is a good question for you. Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Yeah, I guess I started this business probably maybe 3 weeks before we had our first children, and my wife had 2 at once.
Yeah.
Felix and Lola, our kids, they're now 2. And so we started talking about this, just as they were born. And then about 6 months into that, I was starting to do a fair bit of work in this space, but not only that, I was working as well. And so it put a lot of stress, not only on me, but also on our family dynamic and on my wife, who sort of had to pick up the slack with 2 newborn babies, which is, as a lot of people know, an absolute cluster. And so I guess understanding what it is that you're biting off is important. The most stressful thing for me was when early on we were raising capital, and we needed to buy X or fund this, and we just didn't have the capital coming in. People were doing very, and rightly so, doing very in-depth DD on us.
Yeah.
And so it took them a long time to make a decision. Sometimes it might be 3 months from first meeting to capital dropping. And every time you finish,
that's still pretty quick, though. I must say, Alec, 3 months.
Yeah, I guess Yeah, I guess so. And I'm not throwing any shade on these people. I think that's exactly how you want it to be, right? You want to keep the deal open and keep these people engaged, whilst keep the I guess the business you're investing in engaged, but also have time to make your decision and to make an informed decision. But there were times when we would owe people money, and we'd have to sort of call them up and say, "Hey, look, this invoice is due this week. We need another couple of weeks." And so no one likes being that person, and we didn't intend to be those people, but it happened, and it does happen. But again, we were honest, and we just said, "Look, the money's coming in. We're just a little bit delayed," and people
Yeah.
were mostly pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one other thing actually, which
Yeah.
is worth saying. We went into a relationship with a guy, and I won't name names, but he sort of promised the world and delivered fucking nothing.
I know the type. Yep.
Yeah, they're around, and at the time when we were very early on in the business, this guy seemed to be the saving grace. He's like, "Oh, yeah, I know the owner of Red Bull, and I know these people, and I can leverage these relationships, and I've been in the beverage industry for a long time, and this is what you got to do." Anyway, all that, we had a contract, and Braden and I were like, "Yeah, it makes sense." 5% of the company signed the contract. Again, that sweat piece where we thought there's value, so we'll give them the sweat. And then it just sort of started becoming more and more apparent, and this guy was just taking us for a ride. And so dealing with that was pretty stressful, because there was legal involved, and we obviously didn't have enough cash to support that sort of operation anyway. And then trying to, I guess, repel these dickheads from ripping you off, and also it looks bad to investors when you go up and you say, "Hey, we brought this person on board. They own 5%, but they're doing fuck all."
Yeah.
The next investor comes on and like, "Well, I'm paying 100 grand for that 5%. How does this work?"
Yeah.
And so we had to get rid of him, which wasn't, it wasn't ugly, but it wasn't pretty either. And
So what would you do differently to avoid that?
I would always do milestone based remuneration, however it looks. So if it's equity payments or whatever it is, always milestone based, and you need to have a very clear indication of what success looks like.
Yeah. And could you have done more due diligence on this guy, do you think?
Yep, definitely. We did due diligence, and sort of to the best of our knowledge. And Brado and I were very new into the beverage industry, and so we didn't necessarily know how it all worked and the intricacies, and we didn't have much of a network. But he did come recommended from a good friend of ours, and we jumped in way too quick, really, and we signed a contract that was a piece of shit. Yeah, it's still a contract, and we should never have done it, and we should have known not to do it. And I'm the kind of person that would tell somebody to make sure you've got a really nice contract and make sure it's read by your lawyer. But I went ahead and signed it anyway. So I kicked myself in the dick for that one, and that is my fault. And I do know better, but sometimes you're getting so caught up in the momentum, and you're juggling a baby while you're on the phone or whatever it is, and you just do things. Yeah. So yeah, you got to take your time and that sort of thing.
What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
People.
Yeah.
Every day of the week, people bring so much more than just grunt. In fact, the grunt is the easy part to find. So people anybody can do work. It's more about the advice, the connections, the lived experience that you really want to bring in, and the perception of the brand. Like, people need to understand what it is we're trying to achieve, and share that drive for success, share that passion for growth, share that sort of key value system that you have about the project, and that, I think that's really important, because otherwise you're going different places and you're doing different things.
What have you enjoyed least about managing fast growth?
Waiting. I don't like waiting, and so we're working on a pretty big deal at the moment, which I can't say too much about. And this is the difference between that valuation and maybe not that valuation.
Yep.
And we've got a great relationship with the guys we're dealing with, and I would have hoped that today's today is the day apparently. So if my phone rings, I'll just put you on mute. But apparently today is the day that we're going to have some clarity around this deal. And if that goes ahead, we're going to have some really strong. We're going to have a very, very strong 2023 and onwards. But as I said, and rightly so, 3 months isn't a long time to wait for capital to drop. But in my mind, it's a fucking eternity. And so, yeah, the worst thing, the hardest thing for me is waiting. And that's where Braden is really fantastic, because I call him and I say, hey, mate, do you reckon I should give these guys a nudge? He says, no, just give them a fucking break to go. It's only been a day or whatever, you know? So, waiting.
What do you love most about growing a small business?
Growth. I love the growth, Troy. I like to see success. And part of it, I'll admit, is ego driven, but I like to be able to say we did this and it made that happen, and it made it happen big. And so the growing a small business, and to be clear, I don't plan on always having a small business. And I think there are some small businesses that make fucking great money, and there is nothing. A small business or a big business, I think both have their pros and cons, right? And there is nothing. I'm not throwing shade on having a small business. I think there's great small businesses out there. There's sometimes, I think, a negative connotation around small business in terms of it is small, but there is nothing that I couldn't refute that anymore. But I always wanted to run a big business because I like a lot of things happening at once. And so that's what I'm most passionate about, is just scale. Let's just scale the fuck out of this thing. And a beverage company is very scalable.
What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
Biggest mindset shift. I don't know if I've really had any mindset shifts. I guess no, I can't answer that question. I'm sorry, I don't know.
That's right.
Braden and I very early on, we wrote down our strategy, and we said, this is a one pager of how we see the business right now, and we review that. We still review that, and it's effectively exactly the same. One mindset shift, and this is not necessarily a mindset, but more of a strategy shift, is that we were going to build this company from the ground up and have all in-house staff. And so you have your own sales team pounding the pavement out there in the wild, doing their bit. And that's a bigger operation to build, but it's a more valuable operation at the end of the day. But we are now entertaining third-party relationships and how they might come in to make that trajectory a little bit steeper, and that growth a little bit quicker. So I guess that's a mindset shift. I always thought we'd do it all on our own backs, but now we're sort of partnering with different people to build it out quicker.
The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
Cleanliness. Absolute cleanliness. So everything's in the cloud, whichever cloud it is that you store your shit in. Keep it clean. If you're updating your financial forecast model, or if you're using a forecast model, if you're not, you should be. But if you are using a financial forecast model, use it. Like, actually use it. And if you didn't hit your sales target that year or that month, change it, because it's going to impact your cash flow down the line. Yeah. And so keep your shit up to date. Keep your file storage clean, because it will save you so much time.
Yeah. Jump over to growasmallbusiness.com and leave your details to get a short 2-minute email I send on Fridays to help small business owners like you become better leaders. I include some reading or professional development resources I've discovered in the last week. Can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening? So you've had a few businesses.
Definitely.
So,
yeah. We, at one of our businesses, we had a mentality of we had, like, I guess, this perception of it's okay to look in your immediate network to people you want to employ. And so we hired a couple of friends, and it was a decent sized business, maybe 15 staff or something. And we employed a couple of friends and that sort of stuff, and they ended up being useless. And then you've got to have a tricky conversation. Yeah. Go through the traditional means for hiring, in my opinion. I think Don't let anybody hire for a role that they are not managing either. We had some fucking nightmare staff of people who sort of um, hired outside of their department. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, why would the head of accounting or the CFO hire somebody in marketing?
Yeah, exactly.
But it happens, and it's just fucking sideways. But so, yeah. Look, we added one guy on an equity deal very early on with Dodge, and I regretted that. But we got it all sorted out, and we did get a little bit of value out of the relationship. So yeah, look, some wins we've had is the team now is very, very strong, and we're leveraging the relationships of the team into some pretty strong partnerships for the business and growth opportunities. The mistakes we've made is just maybe even born out of desperation at the time. We were keen to see this thing happen quick, and we wanted to have experts on board to make that happen. And so we made a sweat equity deal with a dickhead. And advice for those listening would be: do your homework, do your due diligence, take your time. Culture's important. Understanding the vision is important, but hiring people, make sure the people that are going to be working with these people are hiring them, or at least a part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the next question. What are some things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Excuse me. It's purpose-driven, I think. And so if you go to work and you're kicking a goal once a week, or if you're doing your job well and you feel supported, then your culture is going to look after itself. I think people know they're going to work. I think the startup culture where you go to work and you sit in a beanbag and you drink Diet Coke all day is fucking bullshit. I think people know they need to go to work to work. It's not go to work to jump in a Virgin sleep pod.
Yeah.
But the culture is about chasing the goal and reaching it as a team, right? And so it goes back to that hiring strategy. Hire people that can contribute to the success of the business and are motivated and have the skill to go after it, and the hunger. And if you do that across your team, then everybody will support each other, and everybody gets to be a part of the wins. And then you keep having them because they're hungry and they're getting the dopamine releases, and like it's not that difficult. It's hard to find good people. Don't get me wrong. Like that's very, very tricky.
It's the hardest thing in small business, I say, and where the value.
Absolutely. It's exactly where the value is at, because you've got people that can operate almost autonomously, and when you've got that, mate, you're away.
Yep. Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
Apparently, not very well. I don't like idle hands would be the death of me, and so things are always happening. Like I said, I've taken on another project just for a mate who lives overseas, and so I'm helping him manage sort of a redevelopment of a property here in Tassie. I think to be truthful, I think I'm handling it all right. There's times when I'm a little bit short, and that's usually when there's a big deal about to go across the line or something like this, and it's important, and sort of I find it hard to for my mind to leave that. I guess the key is to making sure you're taking time to spend with your family. Like you don't get that time back, and I've seen it. And I've had people very close to me pass away, and we don't have the opportunity to get that time back.
Yeah,
and I've got two young kids, and so whilst it seems like you need to get that P&L off to the accountant before close a business, it's probably not going to be the make or break, So I just yeah.
How much professional development have you invested in yourself?
It's all professional development. I've never done a course. I think I might have done a certificate of micro business or something like this. But really, it's just about how to put your expenses into a spreadsheet, right? And the reality of it is, with Xero and a bookkeeper, you don't need to know that. What you need to know is how to work with people, because you can employ anybody to do anything. But if you've got a vision, you don't need to know how to input your expenses. You don't necessarily need to know how to bill in quarterly units or 15-minute units or whatever it is. Like everybody has the skills for you, but you need to have the vision. And so, I learn by making.
Yeah. You've mentioned mentors. Anything else on mentors or coaches you've had along the way?
Yeah, you got to have them. You got to have them because they tell you when you're being a dickhead, and they tell you when you're not heading in the right direction, and that's the
Yeah.
most important thing, I think. And it's the same with boards and directors and advisors and advisory committees and people that are a part of your network into I don't know, key sort of aspects of your business and your supply chain and all that sort of stuff. Excuse me. You need people to tell you when you're being a dickhead or when you're not in the right spot.
Yeah.
And so I've got heaps of mentors. My father-in-law is a really strong mentor. He's an industry leader in solvency. And so he's seen a lot of naughty shit go down, a lot of the stuff that you don't want to do as a business. And so he's often the devil on my shoulder saying, oh, you shouldn't do that, or you shouldn't do this. Have you thought of that?
Yeah.
A hangover preventative, are you off your fucking head? That sort of stuff. And,
Yeah.
and it's a good thing to have, you know?
It is.
And as long as
Otherwise, your ego gets out of control. Mm.
Yeah. And also you don't think you jump into deals too quickly or whatever it is. And so I think mentors are the most important thing. And I think your board of directors should all be your mentors.
Yeah. So you have a board of directors at the moment?
Yep, we've got a board of directors. We've got a board of 4, soon to be 6. We have people across marketing, liquor in general. We're bringing some people in across distribution and optimization in terms of product optimization, and we'll be bringing someone in finance.
That's
absolutely
a really
imperative.
That's great.
Absolutely. So effectively, we will have a department lead sitting on the board for each of the major departments, and they won't do any work in the business, but they do all the work on the business. And so Brado and I are pretty capable when it comes to the spread of different tasks, since we can do a lot of the grunt work. And if what we can't do, we'll obviously bring in. But they just need to tell us what to do, right? And that's what a board of directors is. They direct you. And so, yeah, we're pretty adamant about having a strong board of directors. And then we've got an advisory committee as well, which is basically just a teledex of people we ring and say, hey, you're the business manager for this distribution or wholesaler. I want to talk non-alc, national rollout, key retail. Who do I talk to? And then they make the introduction and away you go.
Yep. Yeah, great.
It's really important.
How often does the board meet, and do you have a chair of the board?
We meet quarterly and we chat every couple of weeks. Currently, I'm the chair of the board, but I wouldn't say I held the most power. I'm the chair of the board because we did the docs, and that's how it ended up. We will, when we go into this next capital raise, or when we, I guess, get a bit further along, and we've got an idea of who the people are we're bringing into the business and what the board seats look like, we will put a chairman in after that, somebody that can take ownership of that.
Yeah, great. You're one of the few we've had on that's exited a business or several businesses. Do you have any advice for the audience on exiting?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few different things about exiting. One is if it gets stale, exit for sure. Like one of the businesses got stale for me, and there's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't mean that it's a bad business. It just means that your motivation is not coming from that business anymore. And so if you want to say, I don't want to do this anymore, that's fine. Often we get overwhelmed by the idea of leaving a project that we've worked so hard, we've poured so much into, and then 2 weeks later, we're like, actually, why the fuck did I stay for so long?
Yeah.
And so I think it's take the leap. A friend of mine works as, I won't say what, but a friend of mine's in a job and she's really not enjoying it. And she's been saying to me periodically for probably the past 2 years, she's like, I can't fucking wait to quit this job. And it's like, well, they're not holding you there, you know, like you can quit whenever you want to quit.
Yeah.
It's just, it seems overwhelming. What am I going to do next? But the reality of it is if you're thrown into water, you'll swim.
Yeah.
So, yeah, do it. Just do it.
Okay, Alec, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
Cash flow.
Favorite business which has helped you the most?
It's an audio book, and it inspired me. It didn't tell me how to do things, but it just inspired me. It's called Contagious.
Right.
It's an audio book about marketing and sort of indirect or more subtle aspects of marketing, but it's just really cool.
Yeah. Any great podcasts or online learning tools you use for your own professional development?
No, not really.
Grow
a small business.
Thanks for the plug. One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
A board of trusted advisors.
Yep, absolutely. final and my favorite question. What would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
Just keep going, I suppose. I don't know. I'm just so happy with how things have been. Like, I don't want to change anything. I don't want to go back and be like, oh, I wish I didn't do that business, or I wish I didn't make that decision. Like, I haven't worked a day in my life when I've been working for myself. You know what I mean? And my wife asked me the other day, she's like, if you had enough money to not have to work, what would you be doing? And I'll be doing what I'm doing right now.
Yeah, that's a great place to be.
It is, yeah. It's fun and it's engaging and it's inspiring, and you have wins and you have the downside, which gives you a little bit of perspective as to how good the wins are, and you can get it all. So, I'd just say just go and get them, mate.
Great. Well, thanks very much for your time today, Alec. I think the audience get a lot of value out of what you've shared with us. You've had a very eclectic business career, which I'm sure is going to continue. And yeah, really appreciate you coming on, and congratulations to all the successes to date, and to you
Thanks
on the team.
very much.
Have you back on in a couple of years, see how you're going halfway through your 5-year BHAG.
I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully I won't have my tail between my legs, and I'll be able to talk to some more successes. But thanks for having me, and thanks for starting such a great initiative. I think a lot of people will get a lot of value out of it.
Thanks, mate.
No worries.
And for our audience, we'd greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.